Okay, good morning. My name is Samantha Marable. I'm a part of Melco's application team, and this is our Design Shop talk that we're trying to do every week for y'all to answer any questions you have about Design Shop, digitizing, pretty much whatever you'd like to learn more about. We want to hear so we can answer for you. I hope this is working. Do you guys hear me all right? I don't see anything, so I'm going to assume yes. Okay, so I had a few questions that came in earlier, so I'll go ahead and talk to those. And then from there, I'll check back on the computer and see if we have any other questions. So there was a question from, let's see, I gotta get the names right. I think Cindy and Reva, but I forget who asked what, so let me look. Hi, oh great, you guys can hear me. Excellent. All right, so we had a question on pull compensation. All right, so what is it? How do you make your letters look fuller and that sort of thing? So first off, what is pull compensation? How do you get to it? How do you adjust it? So it's one of the properties within DesignShop, and to get to it, what you would do is go into your properties. So you'd right-click on whatever object you're trying to adjust, and you go to properties, or you double-click on the element, whatever it is, and it's under the pull comp tab. So pull compensation is something that we have to take into account because embroidery, just in its nature of how you sew it, it's going to shrink up some. All right, so if you're going to sew something and you want it to be I'm going to exaggerate, an inch wide or something like that, just from it stitching from side to side and pulling, your columns are going to narrow up. Everything's going to shrink in. So if you've ever noticed you've sewn a design and the border doesn't quite match up and there's slight gaps around it, you can adjust some of that with, better digitizing techniques with underlay and whatnot. But of course, you then compensate for the shrink that you see using compensation. So there are multiple types of pull comp. So if you go under the pull comp type, what you'll see is you can do it by percentage or by offset. I'm not sure about the other guys. I know I have a strong preference to using offset for most things I do, and this is why. So what I have here is a box drawn, and it's just a square, all right, with no pull compensation. You can see it's set to 100% and 0. Hi, Judy. So what you'll see is if I scroll over here, I have that same square, so this is the exact same square that I have drawn, but I did pull compensation by 20%, 120%. So what is that doing? Well, it's going to overstitch from your wireframe by 20%. All right, so if you look at it here, oh good, Nate uses pull offset too. Yeah, I never use pull comp percent ever. I always use pull offset. So what the percent is doing is it's looking at the length from one side of your wireframe to the other, and then it's going to overstitch. It's going to compensate for that shrinking by whatever percentage you tell it here. So what you can see by using the pull comp by percent, you can inadvertently be adding distortions into your designs. So I know I've gotten calls before from people who have scripted text, right? So they've got something in one of those pretty script fonts, and it's really thin and they want it to look fuller. They want it to look thicker. So they add pull compensation. They said, hey, I've got my pull comp up to 180%, and it's kind of thicker, but now it's looking strange. Well, why is that? Well, it's the base effect you see here. The narrow sides, so that elements where you have very little length aren't getting much wider, whereas down here, where you've got a really long length, it's compensating more, so it's overstitching, so you're distorting your font. So rather than using pull, hi there from Colorado, so rather than using pull by percent, what you can use is offset, which is what Nate typed in and what I use exclusively. So all pull offset is going to do is it makes it bolder. That's really all fundamentally what you're doing. It's going to make your columns just a little bit wider in the programming of the file, so that when you go to sew and it shrinks up, it ends up looking nicer, and you don't get that really thin, not quite so full looking text. So by using pull offset, if I zoom in on here, what you'll see is I've got my wireframe, and I've told it this is excessive. All right, I wouldn't recommend using 10. It's just so that you can see it. That's going to overstitch outside of the wireframe by a constant amount the whole time. So rather than what we saw over here, where it was getting more and more away from the wireframe and now no longer looking like a square, Well, now it still looks like a square. It's just a little bit bolder from what I originally drew. So that same trend holds with your fonts and for your text. So if you're working on something, all right, let's just do a new file instead of playing with this one. So if I go and create some text, and let's say, I don't know, whatever. All right, so I have some text. I come over and give it a scripted font just so you can see one. Let's do auto apply, make it easier. All right, so let's say you like this font. It looks pretty good, but you just want it to look a little bit thicker, a little bit fuller. Well, you know, one, make sure you have good underlay. Underlay is really important for a quality design, but also come over to your pull compensation and add it. Personally, I try to stay no bigger than 3. If I'm really finding that I'm wanting to make it a really large number, just I make the text bigger and put this at a more reasonable, somewhere to 1 to 3 in that range. So, hi Rachel. So that is kind of where I end up with my offset. I'll usually leave it somewhere between 1 and 3, and it just makes it a little bit bolder. The thin areas actually get a little bit thicker so that you get a little bit clarity there. It's not distorting your shape and whatnot. So I hope that helps kind of clarify pull compensation. Said I put as a bare minimum 1 on everything I do. It's just become a habit. And with lettering, you know, I'll routinely go up as high as 3 on really narrow fonts. On the bolder, like block type fonts, 1 or 2 is enough, at least I find. All right, so that's on pull compensation. If you have any other questions, go ahead and type those in. I'll check back on there. And for now, we had another question which came up, which was, you know, how do I digitize? You know, how do I create my own designs from scratch? All right, so I know there are, but they went ahead and put links on the discussion already for you for different videos that you can review, and I highly recommend those. Nate did a fantastic job going through them, of kind of getting you familiar with the tool. There's a lot of them out there. So there's a series of them, which I always kind of group in the getting started classes, which are really focused on getting you comfortable with the software, the layout, editing other people's designs and working with that. And then there's another series of them, which is how do you start from scratch, the artwork, importing your artwork, sizing it, the different things you want to think about, and, you know, how to use the different tools. So what I'll do here is just a brief example, but I really do suggest you go look at those videos. If you've gone through them and you're still have questions, type them into one of these DesignShop talks and we'll go through them. So let's see, I saw someone asked another question. All right, we'll come back to the needles in a bit. Okay, so let's go. First off, when you're working on a design, the very first thing you want to do is what artwork are you going to work with, right? So you have raster graphics or vector graphics. If you can ever get vector graphics from your customers, you know, it makes life a little bit easier. I do find that there are some customers that have really strong branding standards, so they know what a vector is. And then there's those other customers who have no idea. When you ask them for a vector file, they look at you like, is this photo I took going to work for you? So, you know, you'll find different levels of customer understanding, which is okay. We can work with them all, whether it's vector or not. But if you have a vector file, it does make life a little bit easier because now those shapes have already been drawn for you. So rather than having to trace, which is what a lot of digitizing is tracing our designs, you can use that as a starting point, if you will. Sorry, let me get the questions up so I can see them. All right, so first off, you want to go grab your artwork. So you can insert or open. You guys have these as well on your C drive under Designs, Graphics. You'll see there are different graphics in here for you to play with. I know this Earth Day example in the pre-recorded classes, and I know when I've taught in the past, we've always gone through this. It's just a good example to go through all the tools pretty simply. I'm not going to do that one. Let's look at just something else. Maybe this chili pepper. All right, so this is just an image. It's a raster-based graphic, and if you zoom in on it, you can see it's not the best quality. Okay, so you'll notice it's got a lot of pixelation on there. So that doesn't mean it's not it's still usable. It's just something you're going to have to work with. All right. Now, if you had a vector, you wouldn't have to worry about any of that. So once you get your design in, the next thing you'd want to do is scale it to the size you want. You're going to make different digitizing decisions based on how large or how small something is. All right. So on this one, and what I mean by that is if I'm digitizing this as a left chest logo and I want it to be 3 inches, I might use more satin stitches, less fill. Whereas if I'm going to do, you know, something that's 8 inches or 12 inches across for the back of a jacket, I'm going to have a lot more fill. So you're going to have to think about the designs different. Now, of course, you can scale it later, but what you'll find is if you digitize it super small and then try to make it really large, most likely you're going to have to go play with it, re-edit it, even change how you digitize some of the elements. So it's easier rather than doing that exercise, just to size the artwork to start with. So artwork's non-selectable. All right, if it's a vector, you can select it, but you can see this picture, I can't select it. So I have to come over here in my graphics list. Once it's selected here, you can scale it to whatever you want. I usually do it by number here, but you know, you can click and drag, whatever you want to do. All right, so once you get it to whatever size you want for your design, or at least close, you would do that. So there was a question on if a graphic is just way too large, what do you do? Well, just what we did here. We select on the image of the graphic, and I usually do it down here and get me in the rough size that I want. So if I know I want the width to be 3 inches, I would just type 3 inches and move along. Okay, and then you can refine it by then scaling it here, but you have to select it in your project view. It's non-selectable otherwise. So once you've got it in there, now you plan out your work. Okay, so if you're looking at digitizing or creating your own as steps, 1 is artwork, 2 is get it to the right size, 3 is plan out what you want to do. So how do we want to digitize this? Good practice is you always want to work from back to front, right? So what would be the background of this guy? Well, I'm not going to sew the white. I just want the chili pepper. So if I'm going back to front, well, I don't even know what to call this. The leaves sit on top of it. So I would probably do, let's see, is there a way to resize by dragging without having it resize all sides? Yes. So before we move on to digitizing, down here, I can unclick that button, which is locking the aspect ratio. And let's say I want the height to be 1, just to squish it. So you can see that will get rid of the aspect ratio, so you can scale either or both sides. Okay, all right, so planning this out, we work from back to front. The back is going to be our color, right? I probably want to sew my chili pepper first, so the red part. Then I would sew my leaves, the stem, since it's not connected, you can do it whenever. I'd probably do it, you know, do this one, finish up there, and then do this last. It really is a personal preference. Okay, but we're going to do a fill for that, and if you're trying to decide whether you're using fills or columns and you're not quite sure what you should be using, look at the length of an element. So you have the measuring tool here, you would left click and drag, and you can see from there, like in this case, that's 187 points, much larger than 70, so I'm better off using a fill of some sort. All right, so to then digitize it, I go create a fill. So I'm going to use the complex fill, which is this first one, and trace it. Now, this is not the best artwork, so I'm not worrying about all the pixelations. I'm just using my left clicks and right clicks to get around it. Your left clicks are straight points. Your right clicks are going to be your curves. And you'll notice, anyone have any guesses? Well, I guess I can't hear y'all, so I'll just tell you of why I'm not going where the red touches the black exactly. And the reason that is you want to have some overlap in your designs, at least that's my preference, so that you don't end up with gaps. Remember when we were talking about full compensation, things narrow up, they shrink. So if it's going to shrink, if I do it line to line, that's when you're going to see gaps between it. So by having in and digitizing in some overlap, you end up with a design that's got full coverage and you'll be able to see everything. All right, so I traced my shape, I hit enter to close it. Now we're at a point where we need to add holes. That's what this, you'll notice the cursor changed. It's a cursor with a little floating hole. That's actually this icon, which is insert hole. If you're ever confused, look down here. It'll also tell you what it's wanting from you. So you can see it says input hole or hit enter to input entry point. All right, I don't have any holes in the red, so I'm just gonna hit enter. I'm gonna give it a start point, a stop point, and a stitch direction. Okay, so let's make it red, select it, and see what we got. It's pretty much a flat fill, right? So you can play with that, so keep that in mind to add some texture to it by either using a curved fill, so by using the curved stitch directions, or adding effects to the fill. So that's under properties, and there's really no right or wrong. It's what do you like, what looks good to you. Maybe a flat fill's just what you want. Maybe you want to try to give it a little more texture, add lines in it, whatever. Play with it. It's a lot of fun. I mean, here, I'll give you an example. If I go change the stitch direction, let's say instead of the straight one, I want a curved, and I don't know. These I always just play with until I like it. Okay, so it's kind of interesting. Not quite how chili pepper should look, but you know, you can play with it, and there's a lot of fun you can have just by adding different stitch directions along there. Okay, it's kind of a neat look. Anyway, so you can see there's a lot you can do, and it's all I'm doing here is playing with it, looking at it until I'm happy with it. So what's good, whatever looks good to you. We all have our own different opinions of what looks great, and that's what makes, you know, all of us a little bit unique. We can do our own things. Now, if it goes crazy like that, just rework where you're putting your points until you get it to look how you want. I don't much care for, I liked one of the previous ones. Oh well. Anyway, you get the idea. All right, so once we have that, now we can look at our leaves. I usually leave stuff off of 3D and only turn it into 3D when I'm going into just see how the stitches are laying. But here we'd want to do our leaves. Now these, we can do it as one solid piece, which, well, would, oops, undo. While it would, you know, fit the bill, because it would be leaves, it wouldn't be that interesting. I think they would look nicer if we did them as column stitches. So we could do some columns, and, you know, it's all I'm doing is picking points that I think might work for these leaves. There we go. So let's say that I ended here, so if I start there, I can avoid a trim. Okay, so let's put maybe, I don't know, I'm gonna have to fix, I'm not tracing the art very well because I'm trying to make it look more leaf-like. See? So I can add a few leaves. So now this one started there, ended here. My next one started here, ended there. Well, if I move my end point back here, so it starts and ends, now I can avoid a trim. Okay, so when you notice when I update my trims, there's no trim there anymore. All right, well, that's convenient because, you know, having a bunch of trims is never any fun. Okay. Anyway, that's ugly. You get the idea, though. Okay. Well, these don't look very realistic anymore. I don't know. I usually just play with them. If I took a little time to think about it ahead of time, could probably make it look a little more realistic. But yeah, there you go. All right. So as you go through it, you know, doing your own design really is you just work through it until you like what you see. Once you've got their design kind of, that's not the best, but at least looks like leaves, then you can optimize some of your stitching and whatnot. If we want to add a border along this guy, there's a few ways we can do that. A really quick way is hold your shift key down and click on the single line, and now I've got a border. Notice it added borders under the leaves, which I don't really want, so I'm going to split the element up here just so that I can delete that portion of the line that I don't need. Okay, so now I've got a little bit better. If I turn off the artwork, you can see what we have so far. Okay, so it really is just playing with it until you get the design that you're looking for. All right, let's see. Looks like Nate's answering some questions. Okay, great. All right, so really that's what digitizing is all about. You're going to go through, look at your design, look at the artwork, scale it, and just work your way through it. Now in this case, you'll notice I now have a bunch of trims that I don't want. So again, I'm just going to, you can use the what is that thing called over here? This guy, the auto sequence, if you want. I tend to not use that personally, mainly because I like to control how everything ends up. I like what to say what's going to be on top and what's going to be on the bottom. But, you know, by using auto sequence, it relayered all those leaves. And notice when I update my trims, I now have no trims. So it rearranged all my starts and stops for me, so I don't have to worry about them. Okay? So it's really about just working through your designs to create it. So what other questions do we have? Let's see if I can see them. I can only see the last few. There was another one. Of course, the feed won't let me see it, and I don't remember what it was. I don't know. So we talked about pull compensation. We talked about the, needles. I think, Nate, did you answer that? So with, no, it doesn't look like you did. The different needles for small lettering, when you're doing tiny things, you would go to using a thinner thread. That's one technique to getting small lettering looking crisp. And the other is to go to a smaller needle, like a 65-9. So if you use a 60 weight thread and a 65-9 needle, you're basically having a smaller, a more refined stitch. I like to think of it as, rather than drawing with a crayon or a dull pencil, now you go get a really sharp, fine point hard pencil. That's kind of what going to the thinner thread and the thinner needle is doing for you. Okay, so you can get better clarity out of the small things. So are there any other questions that we can cover today? I don't see any typed in. So I hope these were helpful. And remember, we're going to be doing these on a pretty regular basis. I think there might be a week off coming up soon, but then Sue's going to do them. I'll be back, and we'll be sure to answer any questions you have. So if you have things ahead of time, type them in so that we can prepare some materials and make it a little bit easier to kind of talk through. Again, my name's Samantha. I hope this was helpful for y'all. And if there's no other questions, I will. Let's see. If I wanted a fill to go from center out, fill to go from center to right and center to left, can that be done? Yes. One of the easiest ways, well, easy is relative, but under here there's actually some designs, custom shapes, I believe. Let's see, close shapes. They give you examples of how that's done. So if you take one of these, I believe that one has it. Yep. So it shows you how you can make it so from center out. So on here, I've got this. Half the circle sews this way, then it walks over and it sews the other half. So you can control the direction it's sewing by breaking it into multiple elements. And that's really with the underlay. So by doing the underlay that way, you kind of make it sew out, and then hopefully it's all held still so that when you do your final pass across it, it doesn't move as much. Okay. If you need to make a circular array, how would you do it? Nate might have a better way. This is what I do with them. So if I'm going to whatever shape it's going to be. So I'm drawing an ugly shape just to have something to move around. All right. So if I have that, oh, that's really ugly. Let's make that smaller. Still ugly. There we go. All right. So I usually turn on the origin, something I can see. And let's center that there. Okay. So let's say I want to make it an array. This is not, like I said, not the easiest, but I usually just do this. Copy, paste, select it. Right there is the rotation point. Well, if I know I want to rotate it around the center here, I would select that and then rotate it around. And like I said, not the quickest, but it works. So again, I did selected both of them that time. Again, move my rotation point here, rotate them around. Okay. Is this what you were talking about, Nada? Hopefully. So that's how I do them when I need to rotate around a certain point. I just copy, paste, select it all, move the point to the same spot that I want to rotate around, and then rotate it around. Okay, great. Yeah, that's handy by moving that rotation point around right here. So how did I get to that? I did it kind of quick. So I selected the shape, and then I clicked on the shape again, because you notice when you select it, the boxes are changing from black to hollow. Hollow right there is a rotation mode. The point it's rotating around is that thing right there, that circle with the X through it. So if you move that, now wherever you move that is where it will rotate around. Now it always resets back to the center, so that is something every time you want it to rotate around a different point, you need to do yourself to get it to rotate around, but then you can put it wherever you need along here. Okay. All right, any other questions? Well, I don't see any others typing in quite yet. I guess I'll wait just a little bit more, see if any pop in. Otherwise, we're doing these on a regular basis for y'all, so ask your questions. We will get them for you, get the answers for you if we don't know them. Hopefully we don't know. So, all right. Blending colors. What's the easiest way to blend small letters? Oh, blend small letters? Personally, I don't do it. I don't know about you, Nate. They're really tiny things. It's just blends are interesting to begin with. So for columns, you can always do this. So you would this is what I would do anyway. So if, let's say you've got let's make that an eye. A really tall eye. All right, whatever. All right, so I've got this. I can go into the properties of it, go to the effects, turn on custom density, turn on blend, and then I usually just give it another color for whatever I want to blend it with. So let's say we're doing green and teal maybe. So that would be 1950, and then maybe 1893 or something, whatever. Okay, so whenever I'm doing blends, I always just go through it on the leave it on auto apply so I can see changes real time, go into the effects, and then play with this. So if you have a small letter, you could get some blending effects by playing with this, and you can move the blend around until you get it to be what you want it to look like. But if things are really small, honestly, I stay away from it. All right. If it's only 2 letters, but not too small, but not large by any stretch, then really what I would do is digitize it manually and have 2 elements overlapping. Either do it like this using your blend, or you would go, you would either do it with the blend here, or you'd have 2 elements on top of each other, and you would vary each of their densities. So one of them you might have a density of, I don't know, 5 or 6. The other one you might have a density of 7. So by layering them up, you're not having such a really heavy stitch on there, so that it's not, a 3-point density thing on top of each other, which is going to be too much. But that way you can control the blend as well yourself by varying it. But this is by far the easiest way, is just to use the effects and play with them. And like I said, I always leave it on auto apply because it never fails what I think it's going to do. I'm thinking backwards. So by doing this, I can see it real time as it updates to get a better idea of what it's going to end up looking like. The other thing when you're doing that is on fills, it's not here on this one, but when you're doing instead of columns, which is what I have, if you're doing a blend on a fill, you have the option to do a trapunto border, which is pretty fun. Seems all blends are top to bottom. Yeah, you can change it though. So over here, if I want that to go the opposite way, I can do a reverse and it will flip it. So it really is just whatever look you're trying to achieve. You need to blend from left to right. Yeah, that one I would just stack them. Nate said he'd make an example, so top to bottom. Yeah, you can just rotate this. Yeah, it's just a matter of how your stitch direction goes when you apply the blend effect. All right, we'll try to get that one answered a little bit better for you, get an example so we can see it. All right. Any other questions? All right. Cool. I guess we will talk to you guys next time. Like I said, more questions you have, the better. Type them in. We'll prep stuff ahead of time for you. All right. Cool. All right. Well, I will talk to you guys next time and hope this was helpful for you. And we will keep doing them.